Welcome everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today we are talking about why Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door Remake is only running at 30 frames per second as opposed to 60 like the original did back on Nintendo Gamecube. You know, that Nintendo console that came out a couple decades ago, that console that's several generations older, it ran the game at 60, but on this far newer console, on this newer enhanced version of the game, it's only running at 30. Why is this, and is it that big of a deal? That's what I would like to explain to the best of my ability and talk more about today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit the notification bell. So there are several factors to consider here, but ultimately, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, this version on Nintendo Switch, it being only 30 frames per second comes as no surprise. Recently, previews of the game have gone out, and everyone's reporting that the game's only running at 30. But we've pretty much already known that the game was only going to be running at 30 since initial reveal. When looking at the footage, it was only running at 30. Now, back then, there was some hopes that maybe we could see an updated version that would be running at a higher frame rate, or maybe somehow they showed off a version that didn't have all the frames in there. But I personally never expected this. Brandon and I, when we did our initial graphics comparison and analysis of this game, it became clear to us why this game would only be at 30 frames per second. In large part, it's because it's a remake and not a remaster. Now, there's certainly debates on the internet right now about whether Paper Mario Thousand Year Door is a remake or a remaster. And I know some people have different opinions on what a remaster is and what a remake is. And over the last few months, as I've discussed Paper Mario Thousand Year Door and referred to it as a remake, some people have called me a liar. And the truth is, it's a remake, and I have a pretty good amount of evidence to support that idea. This is not even really a debate to me. Basically, we have confirmation from Nintendo, and I'll get to that. Ultimately, what I'm trying to explain here is that when we took a look at Thousand Year Door Remake, we looked at the footage, we saw that they weren't just enhancing the initial game. So a remaster, by definition, is an enhancement of the original work. You're enhancing that work. In other words, it's not rebuilding it or remaking it. It's taking that project and just building upon it a bit more. For example, when looking at interviews in reference to Metroid Prime Remastered and why that's been explained as a remaster, actual developers have talked about how that game is running on the original source code of the original game that came out back on Nintendo Gamecube in 2002. It's been greatly enhanced. It's been so much enhanced that it almost looks like a complete remake, and that just makes it a wonderful remaster, but at its fundamental core, it is the same. Thousand Year Door Remake is not. When you look at the game, not only has it been changed to look more like modern games, but it's a new art style. The lighting's completely different. We no longer see the spots on walls and such to show shadows. Now they actually have an advanced, more modern lighting engine. Things also look like paper now, like water and other structures. There's a lot more animations being done. The many details of the world are completely new. The camera perspectives are different, and even the level layouts have been very slightly adjusted to fit the new format. Essentially, this game looks more like a follow-up to Paper Mario The Origami King. And what I'm getting at here is it looks like they probably built this game based off some sort of code similar to Origami King. It's running on something similar. And Origami King, and also Paper Mario Color Splash, run at 30 frames per second. So the modern Paper Mario engine, what they've been working on is something that works well at 30 frames per second to do the visuals that they are aiming for. And so this all added up. To me, this is a remake because things had to be rebuilt and changed. And it does not appear to be an enhancement of the source material, but rather a complete rebuild using the same kind of stuff they used to make Origami King and Color Splash. Of course, there are still disagreements. Not everyone likes to agree with developers or what they see. It looks different to them in their opinions. I think when you put them side by side, it's clear. But something some of you may find surprising is that we got an official survey from Nintendo. And in the survey's been taken down, but a lot of you may have heard the survey already, and there will be a source for it in the description below where there's video footage of it. There was a page in the survey where it was asked, please select everything that you already knew about Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door for the Nintendo Switch system. And the very first option is, it's a remake of the GameCube Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door. And so here, in an official Nintendo survey, it's being called the remake. That's pretty clear in my eyes. But even going beyond that, you look at how Nintendo's branding the game, how they're only calling it Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, and there's nothing else added like Deluxe or Definitive Edition or Remastered, as they do with a lot of their other remasters. But it's actually more so like other games they've remade, like Super Mario RPG and Link's Awakening, where it's just the title. Nintendo's pretty consistent with this. So we have an official survey where Nintendo calls it a remake. We have all of their branding that matches up with their other remakes. And visually, to me, it's very evident the game has been rebuilt using the modern engines as opposed to enhanced based off the original source code. And that's how developers tend to distinguish remasters versus remakes. But maybe you disagree with everything I've said so far, and maybe just the idea of it being a remake alone isn't enough of an explanation. But we got more. So, on Twitter recently, Abib Tanari, a developer at Platinum Games, someone who's worked on some Nintendo games, including Star Fox Guard and Bayonetta Origins, had some things to say on the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door 60 FPS versus 30 FPS situation. I can emphasize with the devs of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door on Switch with the whole 30 FPS versus 60 FPS situation. We tried for a long time to get Cereza and the Lost Demon running at a stable 60 FPS. This was Bayonetta Origins, which is a Switch game. We were able to maintain 60 FPS inside the Tir Na Nog stages, but it just wasn't possible to keep the same visual fidelity and hold 60 FPS in the forest. My choice was either to have an unlocked frame rate with the frequent dips to 30 FPS, or cap it and hold a stable 30. The most difficult part of game dev is making choices about what to prioritize. Everything has a cost, both in terms of dev time to implement it, and in terms of processing time when the game is running. Ultimately, you simply cannot have everything. Cereza and the Lost Demon may not look visually complex, but there's actually a ton of post-processing going on under the hood. The colors fading in like ink as you move through the world, the shading patterns on objects, the way the world curves to allow you to see further into the distance, all these visual effects have a processing cost. I felt the picture book look was integral to the overall experience, so it was not worth throwing away to hit 60 FPS. I imagine the team making Paper Mario faced a similar dilemma. It would be one thing if it was just an enhanced port of the original game, i.e. the version of Pikmin 1 and 2 for the Switch, in other words, a remaster. But this is a full rebuild of the game, another developer calling this a remake. I am sure they wanted to use modern techniques to really make the paper aesthetic shine, and these have a cost. All I can say for certain is the team made the choice they felt would lead to the best overall experience for players. I promise you, it was not a decision made lightly or out of laziness. I missed out on the original, so I'm looking forward to playing it on Switch. So here we have an actual developer who works on Switch, who works on Nintendo Switch games, published Nintendo titles. Someone who's very well qualified and understands the ins and outs in working on the hardware. And as they explain here, they talk about all the different visual effects and things that went into Bayonetta Origins. It's not as simple as it looks. There's a lot of really cool effects that they had to implement to achieve the style they wanted and have something consistent across the board. And so even though Platinum Games has a history of a lot of games running at 60, there are times where they had to make the decision to run at 30 instead. And they have some very fluid, fast-paced action games that are typically the kind of games that you think would benefit the most from running at 60. Yet they still go for 30, and these games in general are still considered to be very good. Astral Chain comes to mind, one of the best looking games on Switch that runs well. And so coming back to Thousand Year Door, keeping in mind what Abib Tanari was saying about Bayonetta Origins, there's a lot of new things that they are doing in Thousand Year Door. As I said earlier, the art style has been completely changed. Everything is made of paper now. There's an entirely new lighting engine. It looks beautiful. We can see reflections upon the floor. There are light rays. The shadows just make so much more sense. The animation work is so much better. There's particle effects in the air like leaves falling. This game has been made to look like a modern Paper Mario game. It matches up well to Origami King, which is a fantastic looking game for Nintendo Switch. And so in order to achieve the look that they've been going for the feel they are going for this modern iteration of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, they stuck with the 30 that they've been sticking with throughout the modern Paper Mario games. And I don't think this is necessarily a problem for Switch, because the Switch is only so powerful, and devs do have to make decisions. Unlike Platinum games, which are fast-paced action games, Paper Mario, especially Thousand Year Door, is a turn-based RPG. Yeah, there are the action moments, but I really don't think it's that big of a deal. Some people like to talk about how 30 frames per second can make them feel queasy or dizzy, and it can be off-putting, but I think what's most off-putting is an inconsistent frame rate where things are choppy. If things are consistent, thus predictable, the flow works just fine. And so in order to accomplish what Thousand Year Door is, running at 30 was a needed sacrifice. With how amazing this game looks on Switch, this is a choice the developers made. And honestly, I really don't think it's a problem in the slightest. But of course, that's my opinion. Some people would have preferred to have simply played the original, upscaled in HD, running at 60. Which wouldn't look anything like a modern game, but it would be running at 60, and some people simply prefer that. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.